Okay, well, welcome to this webinar. We are very excited to be joined by two very standard experts in the area, so Naila Steele and Andy Vasili, who are going to talk to us today about a really important topic around mindfulness that is often not necessarily talked about or understood in full detail, but it has connections across multiple areas and is really important. So welcome, Andy and Naila. We're really pleased to have you on this webinar. I wonder if you wanted to introduce yourselves and a little bit around the topic you're going to talk about today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity today. My name is Naila Steele, and my mindfulness practice stems from a long practice and love for yoga. And from yoga, there were moments where we start out and you get very silent and still, and that's where you drop into the present moment. And that's where it becomes easy to drop into the present moment, because we're constantly being yanked around by our thoughts and what's next and projecting to the future and remembering lovely past memories. So conversation to begin. Mindfulness is such a buzzword right now that, as you said, Vicki, it's floating around. People kind of know what it is, or we're turning it into something that can just be learned in a snap. But the definition that I always like to return to is by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, and he's the creator of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. That's from he's American. And his definition is paying attention in a particular way to the present moment, without non-judging. Non-judging is in the definition of it. So it sounds quite simple, but it's actually quite hard to remain in the present moment. And before I go on anymore, I'll let Andy introduce himself.
So I'm Naila's husband, and I was introduced to mindfulness through Naila, through her yoga practice. So as international educators, this is something that we've really embraced over the last 10 years, and we've tried to embed in our teaching practice and within the cultures of the schools that we have worked at. We've worked at in five different countries over the past 20 years: Japan, Azerbaijan and Eastern Europe, Cambodia, China, and we now work in Saudi Arabia. So it's something we're really passionate about, and Naila has done a load of work around that idea of creating stillness in the classroom in order to get kids really reflecting on their learning, and to get teachers as well reflecting on their own lives and teaching. So it's something we're really passionate about and happy to.
Yeah, and one thing I said to this to one of the lecturers at Birmingham University, I said, "Oh, today we're doing this session on mindfulness, and we're doing this." And he said, "I wish I was taught that as a teacher. I wish I was taught those kind of concepts and those ideas as part of my training, and I wish I understood that." So apparently, he is tuning in tonight, that lecturer, because he wants to learn more. So. Yeah. So how would you describe, like, you've described it really well in terms of the background to it. What would it kind of be like a learning outcome or something that it could be associated with?
Well, to answer that, to begin my own personal practice, I started to practice mindfulness solely for myself, because when things are so hectic in the classroom and you're moving from, you're trying to stick to a schedule and you're transitioning, I think it's so important to just be able to pause. And when you start to cultivate more mindfulness as a teacher, as an educator, you really create respond rather than react. And we're so reactive in our day. And I think that it's sort of the superpower of mindfulness is being able to pause in the moment. And there's always where he says that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our growth and our power to respond. And it doesn't always happen when you are triggered. And that could happen not as an educator, but just driving on your commute to wherever you go every day. Like, there are triggers, and we have to decide we do and can create space to respond. So I know I didn't answer the outcome, and I'll pass that over to Andy, but I think if you begin to practice it yourself, you will slowly begin to know the benefits and how powerful it'll be to share that mindfulness first and foremost for yourself, and then for your students or the people that you deal with or the relationships that you come across. But I'll let Andy touch on the outcomes.
So what we've done in our school and in the international schooling system, we're from the International Baccalaureate system. So we have the primary years program, the middle years program, the diploma program. It's the IB education. And over the past couple of years, the IB has come out really strong with a mindfulness approach and trying to get teachers to embed these outcomes of mindfulness in their lessons and their units and the day-to-day interactions with their students. So there are outcomes that we work from, such as use strategies to support concentration and overcoming distractions. So that's a specific outcome for kids 6 to 11 years old. But when I look at that, it applies to kids 12 to 18 as well. I'm going to repeat it. Use strategies to support concentration and overcoming distractions. Another outcome is be aware of body-mind connection. So it's how you're feeling in the moment, how you are triggered and how it feels to your, within, and to, as Neela said, to learn how to respond instead of react, which is creating that space. Another outcome is to focus on specific, better deal with stress, anxiety, and troubling emotions. And one of the things, so those are just three, might seem fluffy and out there, but when you get down to actually teaching the techniques, it's really rooted in helping students understand the power of the breath and to tap into the breath. And Neela, I'll let her kind of talk about, she does the morning announcements. So she infuses a minute of mindfulness every day in the morning announcement. We're getting, the feedback that we're getting from teachers in the school is that they're using it for morning circles. So the kids are sitting around and then they listen to some of the mindfulness techniques, which are rooted in the outcomes that I just mentioned. So just share some of the things that you've been working on.
Right. So it is, we usually have 2 student announcers, but I begin the day announcing for the whole school a few breath techniques, and they're always related to those ages from grades 1 to 5 for us at the international school. So an example might be you take one spacious breath into your belly, like a balloon breath, inhale and inflate the belly, and then pause and exhale and deflate the belly. So it really only takes 1 minute. Another thing that we do as part of our meetings is, because people physically have to arrive at the meeting and then mentally have to transition, and you have that arrival, we usually begin meetings with 1 or 2 minutes of mindfulness as well. And I'm quite comfortable leading them. Sometimes we have other people leading them, and sometimes and having 1 minute to yourself to just transition and be physically and mentally ready to begin that meeting, which is also a nice way to bring it to your colleagues.
Yeah, so that's absolutely fascinating. The kind of going from the kind of what it is to the kind of learning outcomes, then to how you might operationalize it within schools. I mean, for me, I can really, really see this important in terms of the context of social media. So I remember talking to an 11-year-old boy who said that he would check his phone even if he didn't have a notification because he was worried there was a glitch. So on the one hand, we could say, oh, okay, well, is that a negative thing because he's needing to be checking in on his phone? But he then would say, well, I'm always connected to my friends, so I'm going against the kind of isolation aspect. So would mindfulness help young people in those kind of situations where they're checking, but they also see it as a positive thing as much as it can be kind of some people might say addictive?
Could Vicky,
you just cut out a little bit.
Could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
So the young boy that has his phone and it gets glitched, can mindfulness help in some sort of way? So could mindfulness help the boy that gets the phone glitched in terms of how can he learn to manage the constant?
Yes.
And it goes, I think it goes back to, and you cut out again, but I think we have the gist of the question. And really, teaching that mindfulness, as Neela said, it's kind of like choosing how you respond. So taking that moment, in that moment, to then access the breath, because that boy is probably feeling agitation and stress and anxiety because he's literally addicted to his phone, and so it's literally taking that moment to tap into the breath, and that's where the breath work has incredible impact on our physiological responses. So, but it's not just a one-off thing where you've heard that, controlling the breath is very important. I'm going to try it for a week, and then, oh, this is not working. And then you forget about it and then go on teaching as you normally do. It is creating a culture day in and day out of these mindfulness techniques. And it takes months to actually embed it within the teaching practice where you're seeing the impact. So going back to the boy with the phone, that boy over time will learn there's something I can do in this moment when I'm feeling like this. I recognize I'm feeling like this. This is what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah, there were two things that Andy said. One is the power of the breath. And when you start to extend your exhale, that would allow you to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest part of the nervous system, rather than the fight and flight, the sympathetic, to compare. So one thing would be, if he has this habit of checking his phone, could he attach the habit of taking a deep breath where he really exhales? And that might be just to begin with, because the next part would be delve deeper. And there's an acronym that's used. It's RAIN. And I first heard it by a woman called Tara Brock, who also has a podcast and teaches meditation. And the R stands for to recognize. So recognize, what is this habit? I keep, constantly checking my phone. And then to acknowledge that this might be a problem because I need to feel incessantly connected to everything that my friends are doing, or maybe it's something like FOMO, where I'm afraid of missing out on something. So R, A, and then I really sort of investigate or inquire, why does this mean so much to me? What is the deeper trigger? Am I being left out? Do my friends, and is this true? Let's really investigate. Is this something that I am repeatedly telling myself? Because that's part of the mindfulness, getting to know our own patterns of thinking. Oh, there I go. I'm thinking that again, but it's not necessarily true. And then the last part of it, the N, is the non-identification. this is where I can really say, is this really true? Do I need to go through the whole RAIN again to realize that this habit is not serving me? If I take 5 minutes, put my phone down, and just then begin to apply some other mindfulness techniques, like noting where I am in my environment, noting how my body feels, noting if I've taken a few calm and spacious breaths, or am I hungry, even noting physical body sensations. So I think it's not a quick fix, but it definitely would be beneficial to start to delve into what patterns this child has, or what habits, mostly habits. Wendy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just that idea of self-awareness, and just, Neela just went through the RAIN acronym, and the last part is really non-identification. So removing yourself from being identified to this is who I am, and that idea of being self-aware and labeling in your mind, labeling the feelings and emotions you're experiencing in that moment. And that happens with social media, ghosting, all of these things, like how it makes you feel. Acknowledge how you feel, and if the power of self-awareness lies in acknowledging how you feel in the moment. And a lot of the brain science now is showing that if you can just label it outside of yourself, it diffuses the intense emotion that you're experiencing. So sorry, I thought we cut out there. I got the wheel spinning. The idea of self-awareness is really, really important, and labeling. So that's something teachers can really teach their students. It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel alienated. It's okay
to feel angry,
to lonely, all of these things. Label it. That is loneliness I'm feeling, the noun, not I am lonely. I am a lonely person. I am anxious, so depersonalizing yourself from the emotion.
So that's so important, because we talk about a lot of kind of student-centered approaches, or starting with the young people. And then when it comes to a concern or an issue like social media or technology, we revert away from what we believe is good teaching and good ways of supporting young people. So is it really much grounded in starting with the young people and their experiences first?
Yeah, you cut out there, but I think it's like what you said was like starting with the young people and their emotions. We just got absolutely learning to label, learning to label,
and to also have a safe place to show different emotions. They're just messages. If I'm angry about something, I'm allowed to acknowledge that I'm angry, and then not have to stifle it, or not have to properly sit and be angry in the way that you think I should be angry, but to have a healthy outlet, I think, is also important. And I think that, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add that one of the mindfulness techniques that we learned a few years ago was the 10-10-10. So imagine.
Well, that's like a strategy. Yeah.
And this is something that teachers can absolutely teach their children, their students, regardless of age. I guess you couldn't teach a kid in early years school this, but it's that idea that you visualize yourself being in a very calm environment. So you're literally getting your students to visualize what it's like to be at a family picnic, what it's like to be doing something you love doing. And in that moment, you get them to take 10 very deep breaths as they imagine the moment. Yes. And then you get them to imagine what it's like to feel that they're in kind of a rugged environment, which might be a stressful situation before an exam. It feels rugged. It feels a little bit intense. You get them to visualize that ahead of time. And as they're visualizing, they're taking 10 deep breaths, but they're visualizing what rugged means to them. So what rugged means to you, Vicky, would be different than what rugged means to me, which would be different than what rugged means to our friend Dean Dudley, right? But then, but it's that whole idea that however you interpret what rugged means, you take 10 deep breaths in that moment as you visualize to cultivate this
calm,
the sense of calm. And then you flip it to a hostile environment.
Yes.
So you imagine what a hostile environment feels to you, and you picture yourself in that environment, and it might be a fight with your best friend. It might be a fight with your best friend on social media. It might be a fight with a sibling, whatever it is, but a really intense moment. But you train them to take 10 deep breaths in that moment. So it's the 10-10-10 rule, the 10 deep breaths in a calm environment, 10 deep breaths in a rugged environment, 10 deep breaths in a hostile environment. So these are skills that we can teach our students, and they have their own perspectives. They can interpret that to mean what it means to them, but it's an absolute technique. So when push comes to shove and they're in that hostile environment, they have kind of trained themselves with the breath to deal with that moment.
Mm.
So that, I mean, some of these things seem very similar to the things we would recommend for teachers. And I know you mentioned that at the start. So do you work with teachers on these concepts and practices as well?
Yes. One of the things that I also offer at my school is a mindful lunch practice. And so once a week after we eat lunch, we come together and we practice about a 15-20 minute session. And that might include a quiet space, sitting up in a whatever cross-legged position on a chair. You might be laying down. And really it's trying to be in the body, because we live from the neck up in our heads. And I think sometimes we take for granted that we have these amazing bodies, and the only time we think about them is when you've strained your wrist or you've twisted your ankle, and then you really realize those different body parts. So the Monday session is more to give teachers space in their day to just experience stillness and silence, shared silence, which can also be so powerful, because that's when you sort of have the analogy of like a snow globe. You know, your day is like, I got to do this and I have to do that. And it's all these things that you have to do. And that just creates impatience and hustle and hurry. And we ourselves are great at catastrophizing our own lives. And if a lot of the biggest issue is people say, oh, I don't have time for that. But I feel it creates time. I know that we're not giving you the gift of time, but you might be able to slow down in teeny tiny moments throughout your day so that you can feel a little bit of a big sigh, or being able to yawn unyieldingly and say, wow, I can really feel that I'm tired. Instead of, we all do a great job of overriding how we feel, right? We can override it. We can drive ourselves to work. We can drive you're falling asleep and yet you're still glued to your phone. You're like, just go to sleep. But I mean, it sounds funny. And I mean, I admit to it myself, but it's if we build and cultivate that awareness of physically, how am I feeling? Emotionally, how am I feeling? Mentally, where am I at? And I think mindfulness is a great way to declutter. And, everybody's talking about Marie Kondo. I mean, we could Marie Kondo our brains into just what's useful, what's not useful, and how do I want to be in this moment, not what do I want to do in this moment. And again, it's a practice.
So Gareth, there was a teacher on one webinar a couple of weeks ago, and Gareth said one of his recommendations was he took a digital detox and came off of Facebook So when he says that recommendation to his students in his classes, he's got the kind of, he can tell them how it feels, and he knows that. So do you think that's important? If you're able to teach young people mindfulness, then you need to be aware of doing that practice yourself and be able to promote that yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely. And kids, I find, I teach kids who are 8, 9, and 10. They naturally are more mindful in the things that they do. They will mindfully eat and then stop when they're full, even if there's food. But what I wanted to say, Vicki, was kids can pick up on if you yourself are not embodying what you are teaching. And I think adults can too. So first and foremost, as a practice, test it out for yourself. Whether mindfulness might mean to you that you simply put headphones on and listen to your favorite song, and that's all you do. You're not multitasking. You're just so engrossed in that one favorite song of yours, and that would take less than 3 minutes. So personalize it, tweak it, whatever you can do to start practicing teeny tiny seeds of mindfulness, and then start to share it with your students. And like anything, any skill or any strategy we're teaching, it takes time. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're coming towards the end. My last, I suppose I have 2 questions. It would be, what would be your top tip for teachers and your top tip for young people?
Okay. Do you want to go with that?
I'll do the teachers. You do the young
Okay.
people.
Okay.
Top tip for teachers is that you are in a position to change lives forever, and you always have to remember that, and that every single day you go to work, no matter how terrible you might feel, you didn't sleep well, whatever happened, you're in a position to really change the lives of the kids in front of you. And in order to do that, you must work on your own well-being. And you cannot be there for the kids in body, mind, and spirit if you are not well yourself. So you have to recognize that maybe you're struggling in certain areas. You have to recognize it. You have to accept it, and you really have to do whatever it takes to really be well. And that's why we love and are passionate about mindfulness, because it is something that's very important to us. And when teachers can access it as a tool for their own well-being, it can really make a difference. And then the spillover effect is on the students that they teach every day. And in schools and in PD, all you hear about is it's about student learning. It's about student learning. No matter what you do, it's about student learning. And we want to pull it back and say, actually, no, it's about your well-being. Because if you're not in a position to teach those kids to the best of your ability, then you need to refocus and reshuffle things to be able to focus on what matters most, which is you to be able to deliver. So that's my advice for teachers.
And then Vicki, you said the number 1 tip for students?
Yes. Yeah.
I think I would want the number 1 tip for students to be able to communicate how they felt. So if a child was angry or upset, being able to have a statement that recognized how they felt, just simply saying, I need time out, or I need a moment to just breathe. And I think I remember reading a quote that said, children don't come home to parents and say, Mommy and Daddy, I had a bad day today. They'll say, do you want to play with me? That might be a hidden message. And then parents don't really know. And we really have to be attuned and in tune to how our kids feel, because that's so important. And they don't always have that ability to say, I'm angry, I had a hard day, but at least for them to say, I need time out and I need to take a few mindful breaths.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And where can people go to find out more information?
Andy and I have a podcast where we also talk about mindfulness, and that's called 4 Times Mindfulness, run under Run Your Life podcast. I'm on Twitter at Neela Steele. And Andy?
I'm on Twitter at Andy Vasily. And I think to find out more about mindfulness, you just plug in the hashtag mindfulness. And you really begin to look at, as a teacher, you begin to look at the amazing podcasts out there. There are so many of them that talk about social and emotional learning on a regular basis. And, so anything you want to learn about mindfulness is there for you, and you just have to search and ask, and you will find it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us on this, and thank you so much you do for the profession. You really are leading the way in these topics, and it's great to learn from you and have you on this webinar. So thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you.